The No Nonsense Roundtable. It's a weekly show broadcast on Rochester, New York's 50,000-watt iHeart radio station, News Radio Wham 1180. The host, Dom Geneva, interviews guests from all walks of life, all with amazing stories to tell. What you are about to hear is a recording of a previous broadcast with limited commercials. Now, here's host, Dom Geneva.
Well, welcome everybody to another edition of your No Nonsense Roundtable. I am, as you know, Dom Geneva, your host every week right here, 10 o'clock, and the previous shows, like I like to remind you, are on NoNonsenseRoundtable.com. So look at them, pass them to your friends, do a like and share, and you make me happy. So today I have, for the third time, who has become, you set out when we started to do business that your job was to make me money and not necessarily be friends, but we've become friends. George Conboy, who is the chairman of Brighton Securities, and I have the one guy in all these years that I have learned to trust with my money, with all the other people that I've had coming and going, and God bless you, because I love what you do, and you're here in the studio for the third time, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about.
Thank you, Dom. I'm glad to be here, and I always appreciate a chance to talk with you.
Well, last week you were on the BBC was interviewing. Was that right?
I'm a regular correspondent for BBC 5 Radio. That's correct.
Oh my God, that's great. Yeah. That's great. So let's talk a little bit. My crazy question. I probably asked you the other two shows too. Is that what did you want to do when you were 10 years old? You didn't want to own a investment company, broker, whatever. Go ahead.
No, quite frankly, when I was 10 years old, I probably wanted to be an astronaut because we had landed on the moon the year before. But honestly, I have no recollection of what I wanted to be when I was a kid, and I don't recall ever wanting to be anything. I didn't have enough imagination to have ambition. All I figured I could do was work hard.
So how'd you get to be what you are today?
It's too long a story to go too far into it, but I'll give you the short version. After high school, I thought I'd join the Army. And I got talked out of it. I had no other plans, didn't know what to do. And one day I went to a gas station. A fella filled up the tank, 1978. And I thought, boy, that's a guy I went to school with, and that's his job, and I don't want to do that. I drove right to the high school. It was summer, and I said, listen, I want to go to college. And they said, didn't you apply anywhere? I said, no. I said, well, where do you want to go to college? Now, Dom, I didn't know anything about college. We didn't have a history of college in our family. So I said, I don't know. She said, what do you want to do? I said, I don't know. So she said, what classes did you have that you liked? Well, I didn't like any of them, but I said, gee, I had this bookkeeping course, and it was easy because it was math. I could do it. She said, how about accounting? And I said, okay, accounting. That sounds fine. Sign me up. And she got on the phone, and she called St. John Fisher. They were booked. She called St. Bonaventure. Their accounting program was full. And she called RIT. And RIT said, yeah, we got space. So she wrote it all down. I said, where is this place, RIT? I'd never heard of it. I lived in Webster. And so she said, go there next Tuesday. I went there on Tuesday. The guy gave me a form to fill out, and he said, come back tomorrow. Classes start. That was my college experience, and I became an accountant. It was boring as heck. So after doing that for a year or two, I got in the investment business, and I've never looked back. It's been great.
Well, the investments, it's a mystery to me. I mean, it really is a mystery to me. And the thing about the investment business is that there's so many facets to it, and it's getting more and more complicated, it sounds. I mean, now, one of the things we're going to talk about today, most naturally, is, we back years ago, we were never, tariffs, sure. 1971, and in the 70s was gas crisis and OPEC, and that seems to have kind of gone away, and now it's tariffs and stuff and whatever. So give me a little bit of what you you have a good feel of what people are concerned with and what people have questions about. I'm just going to let you go. What do you think the biggest thing these days is?
Well, the biggest thing about tariffs, of course, is uncertainty. You hit the nail on the head. It is not a topic that we have talked about in this country in any meaningful way other than in history classes for decades. So all of a sudden, we have a change in administration, political change, and the topic comes up that tariffs are going to be our big thing. And when you don't know what's in the closet, when the closet door is closed, what's in the closet? It's a monster. There's a monster in the closet.
Right.
Tariffs are our monster in the closet. Until mom comes in and opens the closet door, you're convinced the monster's in there. And quite frankly, until that closet door is open, the monster keeps getting bigger and uglier and his teeth are sharper. So to us as a nation, as a political entity, tariffs are something of a monster right now, and it hasn't been resolved. We may end up with some meaningful tariffs. We may not. And I don't care what's been proposed. Not much has been agreed, so we still don't know. In the end, there's rarely really a monster in the closet. But until that door gets open, we won't know.
Well, the thing, as a casual observer, a lot of this has got to be positioning. You know, it's like when you go to a car dealer and you ask what the price is, and they point to the window sticker. Well, there you go. You know, they're trying to make a deal with you, at full list, and you can negotiate that down to not being full list. So some of this stuff I would imagine is just positioning. You don't know what positioning is. You don't know what Trump's true strategy is with some of the stuff, right?
No, we don't, and that's probably a good negotiating tactic. I mean, you spend a lot of time, Dom, self-deprecating, saying you don't know a lot of things, and you know a lot of things. It's true. The car analogy is absolutely apt. Whenever you're going to negotiate for anything, if you're the buyer and you go to buy a piece of furniture off Craigslist, you know the asking price is not what you're going to pay. Everybody going into it knows that the opening gambit is not the final deal. Everybody knows, but they don't know what the final deal will be or if there will be a deal. And that's where we are with these tariffs.
Well, one of the things I think people really don't understand is the way that revenue is collected. There's this is external revenue, right? This is, people do not understand that, well, in Europe, and you can explain, we have a couple of minutes in this segment, we can explain it, that in Europe you have a VAT tax.
Big VAT tax, 20 to 22% in nearly every country.
Okay, so let's explain to our listeners what a VAT tax is.
Simplest explanation, VAT, of course, stands for value added tax. But what it really is, it's a form of sales tax. You go to buy something. I'm in Italy all the time. You buy something in Italy that costs 100 euros. Costs 100 euros, you pay 100 euros. Here, we tell you the price is $100 and you got to pay 8% on top of that. In Italy, they tell you the price, and then on the receipt, it tells you what percentage of that price was value-added tax. People who love Europe and they say, Europe, it's wonderful, it's great, it's fabulous. It is. But the fact is, you're paying a 20 or 22% tax on virtually everything you buy, although they have different levels. A VAT is a sales tax, and all the Europeans pay them all the time.
So when something is made in Sicily, let's say, and it gets imported into the United States, the VAT tax is in that price?
No, VAT doesn't apply.
Okay.
It's just like sales tax. So you're in New York, it's $100. You buy it in New York, you pay 8%. But if they send it to you if they send this $100 item to Sicily, we're not charging them New York State sales tax. We're just charging them $100.
Okay. So the money that is collected in a tariff is paid by the person that is importing it. Is that it?
Well, Henry Ford would tell you, and I know you're not a Ford guy, Dom.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Henry Ford would tell you that the manufacturer doesn't pay the tax. The customer pays everything. The manufacturer doesn't pay the wages. The customer pays everything. So yes, the importer would pay that tariff. You personally would not. The importer would pay it, or the shipper would pay it. But ultimately, that's going to work its way into the price, just like the cost of raw materials and labor. However, you hear a lot of squealing from people that, gee, if you put a tariff of 1%, 2%, whatever it is, that's going to cost me a lot more. The reality is that when this all works itself out, some companies will cut their prices to stay competitive. Right. So it's a very fluid thing. Just saying 10% tariff means 10% more cost, that's static analysis. Analysis needs to be dynamic. So we don't know where the prices will go.
But the money goes to the Treasury, right?
Yes, sir, it does.
There you go. Okay, we're going to talk more about this after the break. This is fascinating. This is Dom Genova for my friend Jack Greco with Jack Greco Furniture. I've been talking to you all this time about the wonderful pieces that he has on his floor or can build for you. Indoor furniture. But Jack also has wonderful outdoor furniture and is getting to be that time of year. Wonderful pieces you won't find anyplace else. Go to Jack Greco. Get your outdoor stuff as well as your indoor stuff. Believe me, it'll get warm one of these days. This is Dom for my friend John Myers and his new company, Life Interviews. I'm going to ask you to go look at the website he has, Life Interviews. There's no T in it, Interviews, where you'll see a fantastic presentation on what they do. And what they do is create a video legacy for you to pass down to future generations. More than just getting your DNA, you can pass down your story. Go see, you'll be amazed. It's a great idea, but do me a favor. Wait till the end of the No Nonsense Roundtable. Well, welcome back. We are having a wonderful conversation with Mr. George Conboy, who is the chairman of Brighton Securities, the only security company that I trust.
Hey, me too. What a coincidence.
He's not paying me for this, and he's not advertising on my show. And I tell you something, you should seriously consider joining his organization here and using him, because I have learned one thing in life, is that there is the golden rule and there's the platinum rule. Did we ever talk about that? The golden rule?
We never did. Not
okay.
You and I.
Okay. The golden rule is to treat people the way you want to be treated.
Right.
The platinum rule, and you do this, is to treat them the way they want to be treated.
That's true. Yep, absolutely.
And when you're talking to a financial advisor about putting basically everything you have that's liquid in his trust or her trust, the thing is that what do I want? Do I want security? Do I have to have a certain cash flow? What do I feel comfortable with? Right. And you guide me like that. And I've never had anybody that did as good a job as you. And because you listen, you although you may not call it the platinum rule, you do adhere to the platinum rule.
Well, I never heard that term, but I'm going to tell my young people that term tomorrow. It is what we do, mainly because, look, there's plenty of competition in my business. Why should I try to cram something down on someone? Listen to them, find out what they want, what they need, and do that. That makes it an easy job.
And it boils down to trust. I mean, it's sort of like, there's some businesses like that, like insurance business. You have no idea. Sure. You know, what's in all those documents. Yep. When you buy a car, there's a lot of stuff in there you don't know. So we were talking about this tariff thing. And so when the tariff gets paid, it goes to the Treasury.
That's right, U.S. Treasury.
So basically, you're putting a tax on stuff that's coming into the country.
That's exactly what it is.
And the money the money isn't like increasing somebody's income tax. No. It's not like increasing a sales tax, a national sales tax, but nonetheless, it's a tax.
That's correct.
Now, one thing that you said before that piqued my interest too is that you, as a seller of products, may be able to absorb some of that, which is what Mr. Trump was saying the other day to Walmart. He said, you're making $18 bazillion a year. If this is such of a problem to you, why don't you just reduce your margins?
Certainly some of them will. Not all will, because some companies may feel like they can't or they don't want to. But the fact is, if there's a domestic producer making something that costs $100 and there's an importer who's bringing in something that costs $90, well, that puts us at a little disadvantage. We put a tariff on him. He might still want to keep his sales high and says, well, geez, instead of 90, maybe we'll sell it for 85. So even with a $10 tariff, I'm $5 cheaper. Companies are constantly looking at price.
Right.
Price is a very difficult conversation. You make that, or calculation, I should say. If the price is too high, you don't make any sales. If the price is too low, you don't make any profits. Importers, retailers, manufacturers are constantly looking, how do we adjust our prices? Tariffs are just one of many factors that go into where they should price.
Well, the way I look at it, so the competition is going to be, I think, unpredictable, obviously, because the same TV is going to be sold by Walmart and is going to be sold by Target.
Sure.
So one of them is going to make some type of a price adjustment, I would say lower, to account for some of this tariff, and the other one is going to either have to follow, and I don't think they can maintain the same margins that they used to. That's just what I'm predicting, but
possibly not. I mean, everybody might raise their prices the same way, but what's the likelihood of that?
Right.
Somewhere between slim and none. I think Slim is out of town. So when we talk about the U.S. economy, there's a phrase I use all the time about the U.S. economy, and that's this. I paraphrase Winston Churchill when he talked about democracy. He said, democracy is the worst form of government that's ever been invented. But when I talk about the economy, What Churchill said after that was a version of the U.S. economy is the worst economy in the entire world, except for all of the others.
Yeah.
So we can complain about the U.S. economy, but the fact is we have a very dynamic economy that allows for that kind of competition. So if Walmart wants to slap an extra $10 on their TV, Target might just say, we'll do it for only $8 more.
Right.
And they watch each other like a hawk.
Yeah.
So it's a very dynamic, very fluid economy. Nobody wants to pay more. But what we're not talking about is, why are we paying more? Why might we need tariffs? I don't know if we need them, but why might someone want them? Part of it is bringing money into the U.S. Treasury. We need it because our deficit keeps growing. The other part is, are we at a competitive disadvantage with some other countries and their exporters? People say, well, the Chinese can go sell to South Africa or to Britain. They don't need to sell to us. Let's look at the size of the U.S. economy versus these other economies, right?
Uh-huh.
Our economy is the biggest economy in the world, much larger than China, much larger than the Eurozone. It's been a little while since I looked at the stats, but I think our economy is the size of the entire Eurozone plus several other companies combined, countries combined, I mean. One of the problems the Chinese have, they're massive manufacturers, we're their biggest customer, right? Mm-hmm. If you've got a huge customer bigger than any other, and he says he doesn't want to buy from you, who's got the bigger problem?
Right.
That's you. And the Chinese Communist Party, for decades, has done everything to avoid unrest in the streets. They don't want millions of unemployed people. So this is all very dynamic and fluid. It doesn't mean I'm sure that tariffs will succeed. I have no idea. But it's something being tried, and it's not certain that they will be bad.
Well, the thing maybe I'm being a little facetious about this. My feeling about it is that this country is addicted to cheap stuff turned over often.
Yep, that's true. Yeah.
And that's where the Chinese have kind of got us, because there's a new thing every 2 years. You get a new one, you have to throw the old one away. It's not like you bought a refrigerator or a washing machine 15 years ago and it lasted for 15 years. Now, I guess I read someplace that a washing machine is supposed to last you 5 years.
Gosh, I don't know. Mine's been around a little longer than that, but you're right.
But a new one.
Hard goods like that, but also fast fashion. We never used to buy new clothes every season. Mm-hmm. Wash them, fold them, put them away, whatever. Yeah. But now we tend to a little bit more. So that's an issue.
Well, the thing is that there are things that were being sold now that we never had. We never had like retail for. I mean, like all the drugs and the different pharmaceuticals that you see on TV, and people are. I never understood why people are dancing in a dance line because they got some type of disease that can be cured by something or other, and then you got to go. You're going to your doctor and you're telling him what you want to buy, and
sure.
Can you get me this whatever it is? And I mean the whole thing has changed so much in the past, in the past 20 or 30 years. And we're going to talk more about all that change when we come back from, this news break. This is Don from my friend Todd, who owns Martinizing Dry Cleaning in Fairport. Like I like to say to you, he picks your clothes up and he drops your clothes off. Why schlep them yourself? I love the word schlep. You can save your time and your effort and your gas and do other things rather than take your clothes back and forth. They do a great job. Their number is 425-4242, 425-4242. Use them. I do all the time. Well, welcome back. We're having a wonderful conversation with Mr. George Conboy, who's the chairman of Brighton Securities. Brighton Securities, the only place I trust with my money. Well, other than maybe a couple accounts at Canandaigua Bank, but we'll talk about that. The thing is that I see what Trump is doing now, and he's kind of is kind of getting soft with Saudi Arabia and the people in the Middle East and whatever, and the price of gas is down. Price of gas is down. So we're talking about inflation, right? I mean, So there's inflation on all these hard products and whatever it is, but the price of gas is down. So when it all evens out, and gas is really a regressive tax because the people that can afford it less, are paying the same as everybody else. And is that a strategy, you think? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but is this sort of a way of him manipulating, the entire the entire world market?
I haven't spoken to him lately, Tom.
No, but have you had a guess?
But entirely plausible to believe that it could be, right? The idea of trying to do whatever you can to make the economy better. Now, he's taking a shot at tariffs. He's talking to the Saudis to make things a little better there. Will he succeed? I have no idea. Is it the best strategy? I have no idea. I focus on finance. But he's trying something. The administration's trying something. I hope it succeeds because I don't care who's in office. I want them to succeed for us.
Well, they say rooting against them is like rooting against your pilot. I mean, you got your pilot no matter what. Don't be rooting against your pilot. The thing is that I see, you got the price of eggs are going up, but the price of gas is coming down.
Right.
Okay. So when you look at it in its own, in its totality, it looks like it might be a strategy that might work. Now, the thing about the tariffs is that if that's to bring manufacturing back to the United States,
yes,
that could very well happen, but that takes time.
We call it onshoring, right? Instead of offshoring, we call it onshoring.
Onshoring.
We want to bring jobs back in. I think about, I'm an old car hobbyist. A lot of people know that. And I have battery chargers and trickle chargers and whatnot for these old cars in the winter. Well, years and years ago, when there was a Sears Roebuck, Sears bought its battery chargers, both to sell under the Sears name and the Die-Hard name. They marketed two lines.
I didn't know that.
All of those battery chargers that Sears sold were manufactured in Cuba, New York.
Wow.
Right down in the southern tier.
Okay.
There was an Acme Electric plant. That's not the company that sold stuff to the Roadrunner, to the Wile E. Coyote. No, not that company. Different Acme Electric. But Acme Electric had a plant in Cuba, New York, and they manufactured battery chargers, among a few other things. And although I think they private labeled them for Western Auto and what have you, all of the Sears chargers came out of there. And the plant manager, God rest his soul, he died last fall at age 98. He was a client of mine, and he gave me several years ago a couple of these chargers. But what happened? In the early 90s, we had NAFTA and free trade, and all those jobs went off to China and Mexico and what have you. And that Acme Electric plant in Cuba, New York, closed. So now I can buy battery chargers cheaper. They're cheaper now, but I'm not paying my neighbor down in Cuba to make them. So what am I doing? Well, am I giving him food stamps down in Cuba because he doesn't have a job? And would I be better off paying a couple bucks more for that battery charger and having my neighbor have a job? I think about that a lot.
Well, and that goes to my statement. We got addicted to cheap stuff often. Planned obsolescence. I mean, being a car guy, planned obsolescence in the 50s were fins.
Yes.
Were fins and the style of the car.
My 1961 DeSoto has big fins.
Yeah. And times have, like I said, times have changed and our desires have changed. Car guy to car guy. It used to be the style of the car. Now it's the equipment of the car. Now you couldn't conceive of having a car without GPS and the rear camera and all this other stuff. You need this stuff that you have been told that you need this stuff now to survive. It's sort of one of these things like a Maslow thing. You can't survive without the backup camera now. You got to have a backup camera.
Once you get used to that backup camera, the problem for me is this. All winter, I drive my one regular car. Backup camera, all that technology you talked about. In the summer, I start driving these old cars. You think there's a backup camera on a 1937 Dodge? There's not. So I have to kind of relearn to wrench my neck around and look at the mirrors.
Wow. Well, I tell the story every once in a while. I was back in, 1980 or something. I'm working for Chrysler, and I say to my dad, I says, we'll get you a car, Dad. I says, what kind of options do you want? He goes, well, I'd like a heater.
Yes.
Yeah, I was born in
passenger side mirror was an option so often.
Yeah, he was born in 1910. That was a big deal for him. But getting back to this situation that we're in now. Moody's downgraded our debt, right?
Yes, the U.S. Treasury debt was downgraded from AAA to AA by Moody's, one of the big debt rating services.
Okay, so what is the very top? Is it
AAA?
AAA is the top.
AAA is the top.
Okay, so what is the impact to our listeners?
Well, the theory is this, right? If you have, you think of your credit score. People talk about their credit score all the time. What's the top? 850 or something like that?
Yes, like 850, yeah.
So if you have an 850 credit score, chances are when you go to get a loan to buy that new car or go to get a mortgage, you'll get a good rate, good terms, what have you. But what if your credit score is 800 or 750, 500. The lower your credit score, it's likely you'll pay a little higher yield, or a higher rate.
Right.
Why is that? Because you're considered more of a risk. So when the Treasury gets downgraded from AAA to AA, it's like your credit rating coming down from 850 to 825. Now, two ways to look at it. You can say, hey, that's no good. We're no longer AAA credit. We're going to pay more interest. Entirely possible, yes. It's also, though, this. If you're the car dealer and you got two guys standing in front of you, even though neither of them has an 850 credit, you just want to sell the car and get the loan for the guy who's got the highest credit rating, higher than that other guy. I go back to that Churchill paraphrase. The U.S. economy may be the worst economy in the world except for all of the others. So if you want to buy a Treasury bond because you want your money to be safe, traditionally you buy a U.S. Treasury bond. That's still the case, even if it's AA. Whose Treasury bonds are you going to buy? Russian? South African? You want to buy Brazilian bonds? Probably not. You say, well, what about a place like Canada? That's a good sovereign credit. It is. But Canada is a small country. I think their population is about 12 people, and they all live within 50 miles of Toronto. No, Canada's a wonderful place. It's a large landmass, but really, as an economy, it's actually quite small. So when you want a large economy that's reliable, U.S. Treasury debt is still the place. Don't forget, Standard & Poor's downgraded U.S. Treasury from AAA to AA several years ago. So this is not something we haven't seen before. The bigger factor in the U.S. paying higher interest rates on our debt is just the overall level of debt, not the rating. And the overall level of what people expect, can we still pay our debt? And in the vacuum of just the U.S., it can look a little dicey. But compare it to every place else in the world, and you think, boy, I may not like it, but I like it better than what else I'm seeing.
So there's no threat of the dollar being challenged by somebody else.
No, the dollar. You've heard talk, you've read on websites or wherever for decades that the dollar is going to be replaced by the euro or this currency or that currency. In the 90s, Japan was going to take us over.
Oh yeah.
In the 90s, the Japanese bought Pebble Beach and they bought Rockefeller Center and they bought the Chrysler Building, and that all came to an end. I don't see another economy with the advantages our economy has. For all the problems we have, I don't see a better one, a freer one, a more dynamic economy. Look at all the tech companies that started 40 years ago and now are the biggest companies in the world. Why'd they start here? The most dynamic economy, the most fluid.
And we are about ready to head into another break, and we'll be talking to Mr. Conboy, well, after the break.
This is Dom Genova for my friends at Metro Mattress. Sometimes things actually get better. Your cell phone, TV, and car is better than 30 years ago. More choices, too. So when Nita and I needed a new mattress, we wanted to shop local, but we also wanted the advantages of having lots of choices with new features, so we went to Metro Mattress. Based in Syracuse, they have 7 stores locally. Many of their mattresses are made in the United States, and many have 10-year warranties. Go to Metro Mattress like Nita and I did. You'll be happy.
Well, welcome back. We are having our wonderful conversation with Mr. George Conboy, chairman of Brighton Securities. And let me ask you a question. Maybe it's a little bit of a not a silly question, but an odd question. But back in the 70s when I was a young man, inflation was, I don't know what the heck it was, but I know you can get a 20% on a CD. Your mortgage interest rate was 14%. I mean, what was the seminal moment that changed all that? Was it Reagan? Was it monetary policy? I mean, we complain now about mortgage interest rates of 6% or inflation is 4%. And how did it get to be actually this good from where it was? Because that was disastrous.
Quite a while ago. So at the tail end of the Carter administration, I bought my first house. And I bought a little duplex in East Rochester. I lived in the small part of it, and I rented out the bigger part of it so I could afford it. I had a 16.92% mortgage.
Whoa!
Dom, 14 months later, after the election and Paul Volcker got in, I refinanced at 12.25%. I was practically dancing in the streets at 12.25%. I'm sure a lot of listeners remember that or had a similar experience. What happened was this. It was the chairman of the Federal Reserve who, when inflation, driven by overregulation, driven by higher oil prices, there were a lot of things driving inflation. We had double-digit inflation, prices going up all the time. Paul Volcker raised interest rates specifically to slow the economy. I got out of school in 1981, and jobs were hard to find for college graduates because we were in a recession. But between Paul Volcker, chairman of the Fed, raising interest rates to slow down inflation, and the Reagan administration cutting taxes, putting more money in people's pockets, and cutting regulations, it unleashed what are often called the animal spirits of the competitive economy. And we saw interest rates decline. We saw jobs pick back up. We did have a couple of bumpy years early on. That did fine. Where we had a little problem was for 30 years or so, the Fed kept rates probably a little too low. And you'll recall, if we go back to 2020, 2021, you couldn't get any interest on a CD or a bank account or what have you. You were lucky to get 0.5% on a money market account. So the Fed started raising, that causes problems of its own, because if I say, listen, the rate is 20%, you don't want to borrow any money. And if I say the rate is 0.5%, you want to borrow all you can get your hands on. Both of those levels of interest rates tend to distort the economy in different ways, right? If you can borrow all the money you can stand, you'll go out and buy all kinds of crazy stuff for houses or cars or whatever. If you can't borrow it, except if the rate is 20%, it depresses the economy. You don't want to buy anything. So somewhere in the middle is better. We see rates having picked up from the 0.5% level of a few years ago, and now we're seeing mortgages at 7%. And my young people, this is where I become Grandpa Simpson. My younger employees who are mad they didn't buy a house when mortgage rates were 3% are crabbing now that mortgage rates are 7%, and I'm scratching my head saying mine was almost 17, and they look at me like I'm Rip Van Winkle.
That's right.
So, but economies also adjust when you think about that. Why did I buy a house with a 17% mortgage, 16.92? Because I didn't know any better. When the time came, I thought I could buy a house. I stepped out into the marketplace and said, oh, these are what mortgage rates are. Okay, I'll buy something I can afford. But people who had been buying houses when it was 3% or tried to buy but didn't, now see 7, they say, well, we don't want that. So we're going to wait. But they wait a year, they wait 2 years, they find out rates haven't changed much. Eventually they make their accommodation and step into the market, and home buying is picking up again. It's getting more normalized. Economies, free economies, adjust.
And how much was that house when you bought it, though?
So I paid $40,000 for that house. Right?
You can't get a travel trailer for that.
No, but what happened is the house I paid $40,000 for in 1981, I sold in, I think it was 86, Dom. It was 85 maybe. I sold it for 85.
Yeah.
What had happened was those mortgage rates came down from where I was 17% down to, maybe 8 or 9%.
Yeah.
And that seemed like such a bargain that people were bidding up house prices. So I sold into a little mid-'80s bubble, and I was glad to get out of the rental real estate business. It was never my forte.
Yeah. So to our listeners, and our listeners primarily are over 50. And
Young people, huh?
I have the suspicion that a lot of my listeners have some questions, anxieties about inflation and the future. I mean, obviously, when you get to be like our age, you're not worried about, long term, 30 years from now, it's funny. The story goes, you've seen my convertible. Yes. I'll repeat the story again. I said to my daughter, well, I know it looks like a midlife crisis, and she goes, no, it doesn't. She goes, it's more like a 3/4 life crisis.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, you're not living to 140. Okay. Thank you very much. I'll just will the car to your sister. But let's address a little bit of what they need to be concerned and not concerned about.
So what'd your mom tell you, your grandmother, your father? He said, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? So we don't, as we're older, want to be up to our eyeballs in the stock market. A lot of volatility. And if you dread opening your statement or logging on to look at your account, well, then maybe you should switch up your allocation a little bit to make yourself more comfortable. But the other end of that spectrum is go ahead and put it all in a savings account and make 2, 3, 4%, and you'll just break even with inflation. And unless you plan on dying next year, your property taxes will be higher 5 years from now. That car is going to cost more 6 years from now. Price of gas, price of eggs, price of whatever you're going to do, it's going to be more. So you need to make sure that your finances also keep up with inflation. And what that says is, should you be all the way to one side or all the way to the other side? Almost never. You should be somewhere in the middle. And what that middle is depends a lot on your specific situation. Is your house paid for? Good, that gives you flexibility. Right? Are the kids out of school? Do you have any major capital expenditures? If all those things are taken care of, you can rest a little easier and you don't need to reach too much to make more money on your capital. But you say, look, we're over 60. We don't need to think about 30 years from now. Who says you don't? Let me tell you what the worst anxiety would be. I'm seeing people routinely live into their 90s now that when I started over 40 years ago, nobody really did, not back then, right? Americans are living longer. So the fact is, if you have X dollars of capital in the bank, in an investment account, wherever it might be, what if you say, look, I've got enough that I can withdraw X dollars a year for what I figure will be the rest of my life. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Well, what if you do that? What if you keep it in a mason jar and you just take out enough every year to live on? What happens if you're 85 and you start seeing your value of your accounts go down because you're drawing it out? And you were thinking, well, I'll probably live to 87, but you're 85, you're thinking, well, maybe I'll live till 90. There's no worse anxiety than being older, not being able to go out and get another job and seeing your assets decline. So we tell people, make sure you can generate enough income and at least keep your asset value stable or growing slightly so that you're protected against inflation. Because if you're used to seeing your accounts grow even just modestly all your life, now you're in your 80s and they start to decline modestly, you're not going to sleep at night. And you don't want to be in that position.
No, and having enough gas in the gas tank to get where you're going. But like my daughter said, I'm not living to 140 either. So
no, 140 is a stretch. 104, I've got two of them.
You know, I think that at some point in time, we can make this prediction, and I'm not going to be able to live long enough to realize it. But I think death will be optional.
Okay. All right.
Well, I think 500 years from now, death will be optional.
Not for either one of us, Tom.
No, we'll be gone. Okay. And speaking of having to be gone, we are at the end of our show. And it's a delight having you here. You're insightful. I just love you dearly. And you said years ago, like I said, you're here to make me money, not be my friend. But you know what? You made this mistake to being my friend too. I really do love what you do for me. So thank you ever so much. And I hope this helps some people that are listening to the show, because I certainly learned something, and I think everybody will probably too. So next week, 10 o'clock, right here, it's the No Nonsense Roundtable.
Thanks for listening. Tune in every Saturday from 10 to 11 on News Radio Wham 1180. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll make more.